And we are back. Another outstanding episode of the Square Table Degenerates. Today we welcome to the show musician and actor Mr. Daniel James. How are you today, sir?
Hey, good to talk to you, Joe. Thank you for having me on.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's chilly here in beautiful Ohio. It was a crazy weekend, man. We had went to DC for a little bit, and then the Super Bowl was yesterday. Lackluster Super Bowl. It was, well, I mean, the Eagles won it, but you guys watch, you guys don't, what's your, like, you've spent some time in the States, you spent some
Yeah,
time
yeah,
in the,
yeah. I mean, I do watch the Super Bowl sometimes, but I was busy yesterday. I just saw a couple of clips. I didn't really think much of the halftime show, to be honest with you.
I was coming back from my friend's house and I was coming back to watch it here, and so I saw like a little bit of it, but like I'm not really familiar with. I mean, I know who Kendrick Lamar is. I'm not an idiot, but like I don't listen to his music regularly, so it's
No,
like
I'd rather stick pins in the eyes, to be honest with you. But that's just me.
It just depends if you like the music or not. I mean, when they had on the weekend a couple years ago, that one was good because I like the weekend. It's a different style, but like, yeah, I mean, it just depends how you're not. I mean, because if they put a country guy up there, I'm not gonna like it. I'm not a country music guy, so it's just all you can't ever predict that stuff. You know how it is with entertainment, man. You know, one person likes this guy, doesn't like that guy. You can't please them all, right?
Exactly, and I did notice they booed Taylor Swift, which was a bit interesting. I think people in this country were shocked by that, because they don't realise that people don't like her sometimes.
Well, I mean, she's not a bad person. She's not, no,
No.
but it's just so much overexposure. I mean, I'll tell you a story before we started here, man. I'm a huge football fan. I got season tickets to the Browns. I go to road games. I've been following football my whole life. And when they first started going out, Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce there, the second or third weekend, they're getting ready to play the Sunday night football game. I was getting ready to watch. It was the Chiefs versus somebody random team. And they stopped the whole clip and they brought in Carson Daly of all people. Nice guy, but Carson Daly is just the biggest tool ever invented. He's just doing everything in front of him. So they put out Carson Daly. It's like, all right, Swifties, we're going to explain some football. I was like, nope, bye. Turn the TV off. I'm like, I'm not being pandered to like this. I mean, the equivalent is like, they're getting ready to watch a Premier League game. And they're like, all right, guys, we're going to explain this. You don't want to hear that shit. You're right there to watch a football game. So I think after that, they kind of got the message. And because they don't really show nearly as much, but there are a lot of fans just for the Taylor Swift stuff. I mean, who knows? He's a local kid. He's from Cleveland, right in East Side.
It's a bit patronizing for football fans, though, isn't it? You don't really need someone to spell it out to you.
Oh, it's horrible, man. It's horrible. All right, so what were your early years like? What did your parents do for a living? How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I've got a brother and a sister, both deceased, and mum and dad unfortunately gone. So I'm like an orphan now. My mum and dad, my mum was a cook. Well, actually, both my mum and dad were in the war, in the Second World War. My dad was in the Navy. My mum was a Wren, which is the female Navy. So I was brought up in a household that was very, patriotic and had a lot of stuff. My dad told some great stories about his war experiences, really eye-opening stories. And my mum had a great time in the war. She absolutely loved being in the Wrens, traveled all over the place. So I think when you're brought up in that kind of family, you have a certain set of standards, which are not necessarily better than anybody else's, but I think they stay with you for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you were
very working class upbringing in the northeast of England, in a county called Cleveland, funny enough, which is in the northeast of England, and just a regular working class background. Not anybody in my family is in the music at all. I never sung in the house. I was never encouraged to sing. My mum could sing, but my dad was very anti any of that. So I kind of kept any interest I had in music away from home, and I kind of did it at school.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny. Now that I think about it, like my family. I mean, I'm not really entertainer. I mean, I've been a government worker most of my life, but like the YouTube thing had just started from being just laughing with other adults and doing stand-up comedy and just getting into it. So I kind of feel you on that. It's funny you talk about your dad's got cool stories from the war. Let me tell you, I was in Iraq and it was a lot more boring than I bet you your dad's stories were. My funnest stories were just sitting there on the computer talking to the wife back home on Skype We didn't, there was nothing going on.
Well, I think in the Second World War they didn't have the technology, so there was, you know, my dad. I remember my dad was on the South Downs, which is the south coast of England. You know, when you see the movies with the white cliffs,
Mm-hmm.
and he was on leave, and this plane came down, and it crashed. Well, it crash landed. It was one of our boys coming home. You know, he'd obviously got across the channel just, and within a couple of 100 yards, he came down. Now, if there's anybody scream, I can't imagine that you have any squeamish viewers. But if anybody is eating or a little bit squeamish, or as we call them in the UK, wet wipes or woke, then maybe they need to sort of look the other way for a moment. But the plane came in, and my dad was on the edge of the cliff, and he saw the plane come in, so he ran over with a couple of other people, and they managed to get the top off the plane and pull the guy out because the plane was going to explode and it was on fire. And they laid the pilot down on the floor, and my dad was really wary because you just don't know what kind of injuries they had. And unfortunately, somebody ran over and pulled the guy's helmet off his head, you know, the little like satchel with the ears, and because it was soft, and they pulled it off, and his head came away, half his head came away with it.
Pop off, man. That's how it's
because
always
obviously
different.
you don't do that, you know. It should have been cut off, but the guy could have survived, you know. But that, as they call that, that's like a casualty of war, you know.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
But
Well, I mean, even in like Iraq and Vietnam, a lot of them wars, a lot of the casualties were friendly fire. I mean, with the first Gulf War, a lot. I remember we didn't lose too many people in Desert Storm and all that, but like a lot of the guys we lost were friendly fire just because everybody looks the same from camouflage up above. And, you know, you never know if that's why that communication is so key in military stuff. It really is. Yeah, I didn't see anything too. We had a couple guys that had to go home because of injuries, but I didn't see anything. I heard more stories of people telling stuff because I was just on at the air terminal, you know, with the guys coming in and all that. It wasn't bad at all because it was 2011 and the war ended. That we were the guys who relieved us were the guys who closed the base down, so we don't even have a base over there anymore. So
at least it was coming to an end. I had an uncle that was in Colditz. You know, have you heard of the prisoner war camp, the very famous one? They made a movie about Colditz.
Okay.
And I had an uncle in there, and he had some stories. And I had another uncle who was in the Far East, where it was really, you know, guys had a really cruel time in the Far East, you know, in Burma, in the prison camps. I mean, they were stuck. You know, yesterday they released some of the Jewish prisoners in Hamas released some of the Jewish prisoners. And like there was a guy, they showed a split screen of the guy who was really healthy when he was kidnapped. And then they showed him yesterday. And I mean, the man looked like he'd just come out of Auschwitz. It was appalling. It was so tragic. And the prisoners in Burma that were taken prisoner by the Japanese, I mean, they were starved to death, you know, poor things. So I grew up with loads of stories about prisoner war camps in Germany, prisoner war camps in the Far East, and then my dad's stories, because my dad was in the Navy. My dad joined the Navy because my dad's father was a steel worker, and they had like 6 kids, and they were doing well. My dad's father would, in the steel works, where they rolled the steel, he would roll the steel, and it was just steam. It was like 100 degrees. And he would come out of work, go to the pub because he was so dehydrated, and drink 7 pints in literally 10 minutes. Not because he was an alcoholic, he was just so dehydrated. And unfortunately, he worked so hard. He'd been in the war, in the First World War, and got trench foot. Oh. So to cut a long story short, he died quite young, and he left my father and the kids. And in those days, there was no social security, there was no health service.
Right.
And my father, at 5 years old, had no shoes. When after his dad died, they were poor. And he used to walk from his house to the beach. And when the tide went out, he would catch crabs. He found a way of going underneath the rocks, and he would catch crabs with his brother, and they would eat the crabs, and that was how they survived. So when he got to 15 or 16, the war came, and when he was 15, he would stand on roofs in my hometown, and he was what was called a fire watcher, and he would watch the bombs coming over, and they would get bits of metal, and sell it among the kids. And the strangest thing is, my dad was a fire watcher when he was 15 in a town called Hartlepool. And 17 miles away in a town called Sunderland, my mother was the same age. She was a fire watcher on the roofs of buildings as well. And she was a fire watcher on a roof of a building that made furniture, and she was training to be a French polisher. So can you imagine? She's on the roof, the bombs are coming over. Had that furniture building gone off with all that stuff to French polish, she would have been toast. As it was, she survived, met my dad in the war. But my dad at 16 lied about his age to join the Navy because she got 3 square meals a day, and he left the town he lived in, which he was very poor at the time, because his father had died and they lost their income. So my dad went to the training camp for 6 weeks. Then they put him on a ship in the dark of night, and he woke up several days later, and it was Tabletop Mountain in South America. And if you can imagine, for a 16-year-old kid from the northeast of England that had picked crabs from the rocks to wake up and see Table Mountain. I mean, you know, I don't think kids today could cope with that kind of lifestyle. God forgive me for saying this, but we seem to have bred a generation that, you know, would tremble at the thought of the wind blowing the wrong way.
Oh, well, I mean, the Wi-Fi in World War II just wasn't what it is today. I mean, it would be hard to, you know, like, I mean, when I was at the war, I mean, it was 2011, so we still had, you know, Facebook. MySpace was out by then, but Facebook was in full effect. I mean, we were, you know, it's funny to think, Daniel, you think back to World War II, if they did have internet, how just different everything would have been. Everything would have been different. I mean, the world's so connected now. That's why when people, you know, always come at me with like, oh, World War III is going to happen. I'm like, I don't know, man. Everybody's kind of really connected now. Like, everything's so intertwined. I think it's just so much different than how it was back then. Like, everybody knows everybody in other random countries. People are friends in different countries. It would be impossible. And like you said, the kids today just don't know the, you know, the sacrifice and all that. I mean, can you imagine taking a bunch of, you know, I mean, I'm not saying I'm in shape. I'm barely in shape. You know, I mean, I struggle with fitness in the service, but in my 20 years, but like they say, like only 1 or 2 kids out of 10 is even fit enough for military service today, just with all the, you know, food and everything. It's kind of crazy to think about how much it's just changed. And I guess that's 80 years, but I mean, my goodness, I mean, 80 years before World War II was about the same. 80 years before that was about the same. Just the last 80 years, 100 years, it's just changed so much. Look, you know, like you're saying, coming out of World War II or coming out of the 20s and 30s there, the whole world was kind of in poverty. You know, I hear stories of my grandfather, you know, what they did and all that. And yeah, it's just a different world, man. Totally different world.
I think, I mean, I just think that even people in government now, in the lower levels of government, the new people going in, their life experience is straight from college into working for somebody that's either a senator or an MP in the UK. They don't have any real life experience. So they are helping to create and write laws, and they don't have any life experience. They've never been unemployed we're kids. They've never worked a job from 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. or 2 jobs. They've never struggled in that kind of way. And it really worries me that the people making some of our laws nowadays are absolutely clueless, and also have not really lived under great amounts of stress. So when the wind blows really strongly in the UK, they put out these weather warnings that life is going to end. They say danger of losing life. And you just think, when I was a kid, we walked to school in thick snow. When we got to school, our clothes were drenched. We took our pants off and our Wellingtons and boots and our gloves, dried them on the radiators, and you did your lessons. Nowadays, you get 2 drops of snow and they've closed the school, they've closed the job, the trains don't run, and you just think the people making these decisions have never lived.
No. Well, I mean, we've been in if you think about it, really, since the 50s on, there's been dips here or there, but I mean, it's pretty much been an unprecedented period of prosperity. I mean, even people like me, I was born in 76. I mean, do I remember, lean time? Sure. But I mean, I've always had a house, always had plumbing, always had parents who had a job, or I've had a job, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, I've never really, been, I've had people who have, my friends and shit have been homeless, whatever, but I've never experienced that level of struggle. I mean, to take this generation, me included, and put them in the 1930s. I mean, geez, you want to talk about folding fast? I mean, it's my goodness. I mean, we always know where our next meal is coming from, right? Like your dad and those guys, they didn't know. Like they go on catching crabs, they had to catch their food. You couldn't just go down to the Dollar General or the Asda or the Aldi's and get you a nice steak. You had to hustle for that
The
shit. Totally.
nearest a lot of kids these days get to seeing hardship or being challenged is by watching the TV. We've got a program here called, I think it's SAS or something, and they've got a couple of SAS guys who challenge these guys for like 6-7 weeks to go through a series of hardships and challenges and battles. And I think the nearest our kids these days have to that kind of thing is watching those programs. They don't really have any hands-on experience.
Yeah. A lot of them would rather play the video games than actually go out there and join the service. It's and I get it. I mean, we didn't have right. We didn't have video games when we were a kid. We had video games here or there, but it was nothing like how it is now. So I mean, maybe it's just a thing of opportunity. Who knows? I mean, they always say, all old people say that about the young people coming up. So we'll see. They got their own little things they're good about.
Is it better or is it worse? You've probably got some viewers who are saying, you don't understand it. We've got it tough now as well, and it's all comparative, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
But I think people who grew up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s had more adventure in their lives and more fun. I do wonder now whether the kids have as much fun as people did then.
Yeah, I got a 14 and 15-year-old. They have fun, but I mean, it's like I think a lot of the lockdowns isolated a lot of people. We were already in the middle of isolation crisis. I think. Like people just don't connect. Like I don't really know who my neighbor. I know who the neighbor is over here, but like across the street down there, I don't know those guys. Back in the day, the whole street, the entire street would know each other. But now everybody just sits in the house, does their thing, and I get it. It's there's dangers and whatnot, but I don't know. Well, I think eventually, Daniel, like especially with all this AI stuff, I think we're going to have a huge backlash against technology. Like yesterday, for example, I watched the Super Bowl, right, and there's probably a good 6-7 commercials for AI, not knowing a damn thing they sell, not knowing a damn thing they do. When the common guy hears AI, all I'm thinking is they're taking away jobs. You're gonna have a show like this, but it's gonna be some AI version of me talking to an AI version of you. Nobody wants to see that. They want the human wit. They want the interaction. They want the off the cuffness. They love that stuff. And I just think soon enough we're gonna have that anti-AI backlash revolution because it's kind of already here almost. You go on social media, you go on YouTube, half the time it's just crap. They call AI slop. It's we'll see. It's definitely gonna be fun.
I think what people like is character. I think what people like is somebody that's got an unusual quirk, an unusual story, somebody that's lived a bit, somebody that's got a bit of interest. There's a program we have here, Heritage Chart Radio, and on a morning they've replaced the newsreader with an AI newsreader, and everybody laughs every morning because she comes on and she's talking in a kind of slow British accent. And then midway through the news, she suddenly goes into like a faux American accent, and she's giving the news in a semi-New York accent, and then she goes back to English, and it's like, you're not a real person. We know that that's not a real person. So I think there's a bit of a backlash against it because I think we like people with charisma. We like people with something. Look at the biggest TV stars and the biggest movie stars of the last 50 years. They've always been people of interest. You might not have liked them all, but the big movie stars had something about them, and the big rock stars were either angry or sad or morose. Bob Dylan, morose. Mick Jagger, very lively. I think nowadays, the kids today, bless them, I'm wondering how many people from the top 30 chart or the top 50, I wonder how many of those in 20 years time or 50 years time will still be played. And they'll lie in bed at night and go, God, when I was a kid, we had these great musicians. Like nowadays, we can talk about the 80s and all the great bands like the Pretenders, Culture Club, Duran Duran, Spandau Ballet. They're just the British ones. You've got Hall and Oates, you've got some great, and Pat Benatar, people with charisma and character. And I think that's what has a longevity.
Well, it's funny. The kids nowadays, it's like my daughter, for example, she's 15. And usually you take a 15-year-old girl, that's the epitome of pop culture. That's what all the stations want to play to the 15-year-old girls. And she likes, a lot of the bands I like. I played all the, whatever in the car. And the bands that she was really into, like My Chemical Romance and stuff, these are bands from 20 years ago. There's no, I've never, Nikki, that's my daughter's name. She never come to me once like, Dad, check out this new band I like. I've never heard that once. And it wasn't like that when we were kids. Like when I was 15, I mean, I can't remember your 1990, I was, hey, Dad, Nirvana, turn that Nirvana down, whatever it was. It was not, it's just totally different. I mean, I think that's the death of CD culture and all that. Like back in the day, the way to be a musician was just pull up your trunk. Hey, here's a CD, maybe get a record contract. But now it's all digital, and streaming kind of murdered a lot of that. I mean, I don't see how these guys even get paid with the streaming. I mean,
well, you get like 0.1 of a cent per, I think you have to sell 30,000 to earn 300 quid, $300, 30,000 to earn $300. Now, the man that put Spotify together is a multi-billionaire, same as iTunes and Amazon and all of that. And the artists, only like Taylor Swift, Paul McCartney, and The Weeknd, I think they're about the end, Kanye, and let's face it, he's gone down the pan this week. But they're the only ones that are making any money. The rest of us, I'm on the beach picking crabs with my dad. The thing is, when your daughter gets in the car and she says, play this, and she's like My Chemical Romance or whatever, you know why? Because those bands wrote songs with stories. You had an introduction, you had a bridge, you had a chorus, you had a verse, you had a story from start to finish. And a kid's imagination, if they're sitting in the bedroom and they can't see the video, those lyrics take them on a journey and their imagination goes with it. My question is, and I know it sounds like I'm moaning, I'm not, but some of the songs today don't have a logical story.
Mm-hmm. Oh, my theory on all this is that all entertainment kind of died in like 1999, 2000-ish. Like if you think about go to the mall, go to any place where there's a bunch of people, look at the t-shirts. You're gonna see Mario Brothers t-shirts. That was an 80s thing. You're gonna see Star Wars t-shirts. That was a 70s thing. You're gonna see all the, and they, after 1990, 2000, they started getting good at the analytics. So whatever's gonna come out, we'll make sure it's gonna be a hit. Might not be a major hit. We're not gonna take a risk, but we know this is gonna be good. This is why we got Shrek 5 and Toy Story 8 and Fast and the Furious 72 and all this stupid shit, because they just run it all through the analytics machine and pump it out. I mean, if you look at 8 of the 10 top movies last year were all sequels. That's kind of disgusting from an entertainment standpoint, in my opinion. I mean, nobody takes a risk, and it's all analytical driven, and that kind of killed it. That's why I love YouTube, Daniels, because it's from the heart. You talk to people one-on-one, get the good stories, get people who live interesting lives. Not everybody can live an interesting life. Not everybody gets to travel. A lot of people are broke, but you got to have it from the heart. You got to have it right from the soul, or else people are just going to tune you out. And that's why, hopefully people tune into, this show and other shows like it, because they like that kind of stuff,
The thing is, I'm having a bit of a renaissance. You see, in the 90s, I was in a band in the UK. We had success around the world. We didn't have big success in the States because we broke up before we got to the States. I mean, we went to the Grammys. We recorded in the States with Michael J. Do you remember an artist called Martika, Toy Soldiers?
Yes, Eminem covered that. Yeah, that was a great song.
Yeah, well, we worked with him in the States, and we were about to release in the States. But when we were together, we toured all over Europe and Japan and whatever, and had great success. And then it all fell apart, like a lot of groups. It fell apart, and it was really disastrous. I lost my home, the home I was going to buy my parents, and I left the UK I was licking my wounds. I moved to New York. Nobody knew me in New York. I mean, nobody knows anybody in New York, bless them. And I just kind of drifted and just got my equilibrium back. I ended up in a play off Broadway in New York, and I found myself again. I came back to the UK, and I went back into acting. I didn't want to touch music. I'd been in a record label run by a man, you might have heard of this man, probably not, Simon Cowell.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So he'd ran our record label, and so nobody. When I came back to England, I didn't want to touch music. I never thought I'd sing again. Never thought I'd write again. I'd been burned so badly. So I went into acting, and I did loads of TV in the UK. I actually did a TV show in the States. I lived in LA for a while, and I did a show called Passions. It was on NBC.
I remember Passions, like on noon or some shit. Yeah.
Yeah. And as I say, hopped between London, New York, and LA, because obviously New York and LA is where the TV stuff is, where the theatre stuff is. I didn't end up in Middle America, where the real people are. I went where the other people are. However, it was a great experience. And then I came back to England, as I say, and I was in a show called Casualty, which is a bit like your ER. I was in like Coronation Street, EastEnders, big #1 shows here, and I did acting for quite a while. And then I looked after my mum and dad. They became very ill, and I decided just to step out of the industry and look after them. And then when they passed away, it was just before COVID and the terrible lockdowns, the worst thing that we've ever had in history, worse than World War II or anything. You know, the terrible lockdowns. And it was during lockdown that I started to write songs again. Completely came out of nowhere. And I was on my own. I was in London. All my family were up north. And I went, and I just used to go out for walks every day. And one day I started writing songs, and I literally ran home. I ran about 5 miles, because I didn't have my phone on me. And I thought, if I don't sing this melody into my phone, I'll forget it. A lot of songwriters have to do that. And I got home and I sang the melody into my phone. And I just, within 6 months, I'd written a shed load of songs. And I went in the studio, genuinely stood in the studio, and I put the cans on, the earphones, and I didn't know whether I'd be able to sing or not. I knew I could sing, but there's a difference between singing in the shower and singing in a studio, because you've got to do it 100%. And I genuinely didn't know whether I'd ever do it. And it took me a while to build up the courage. But once I'd started, after about 2 verses, I said to the engineer, just play me it back. I need to hear it. I need to believe. Because I'd had the crap kicked out of me by the record company. They made me feel about this big. They totally wiped my confidence. And it took me decades to come back. But once I'd made that first record again, I sent it out to some people. And there was a guy called Mike Reed in the UK, big TV star, big radio DJ. And he'd invented this thing called the Heritage Chart. And it's for artists who were big in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. They didn't have anywhere to go in the UK. Nobody was playing them. So he started on his radio station playing them, and suddenly everybody wants to hear the new material. You know, Culture Club's on there, Kim Wilde's on there, you know, really Paul Young, Spandau Ballet. I'm trying to think of some American artists. The Flirtations. Loads of American artists are on there as well. And basically, over the last couple of years, it's now got a big TV series that goes out to 86 countries around the world. And what happens is people vote every week, www.heritagechart.co.uk, and they've got a top 40, and they've got the breakers, and it's given a new lease of life to people like me and to some of the biggest acts that were huge in the 80s and 90s, and they're now going out on tours, rewind tours, gold tours, and it's given everybody their career back again. And lucky me, having never wanted to do it again, I've fallen into this chart. I've had a #1, I've had several hits on it, and now I'm getting played all over the place again, and I'm going to different countries to promote my song, but I'm more in control now. When I was signed to the record label, there's a lot of things going on in the UK now about boys who were in bands when they were young and what the record companies put them through. And the stories are starting to come out. I mean, I could tell stories that would curl your hair. And I am going to write a book because some of the things that are happening are shocking. But there's a big renaissance for people that were big in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. You know, Jethro Tull, lots of big Electric Light Orchestra, you know, really big, credible musicians who filled stadiums. They're now in the Heritage Chart, and I'm among them. I'm from the 90s. And it's like, you know, Nick Kershaw, Howard Jones, all big in the States in the 80s and 90s, you know, and we're all getting a new lease of life, and it's fantastic. And my new song is called Promises. There's the QR code that takes you to my website, and I'm just having a ball because I get up in the morning and I decide what song I'm going to record. I decide what's in the video, what I'm going to wear, what gigs I'm going to play. You know, I've got some gigs coming up, and I'm not knocking, I'm not slating what I did in the 90s in the band Yell. I was in Yell. I'm not slating it. It was amazing. Toured the world, just had, you know, the thrill of being on TV every week. 30 magazine covers every record release. Who would say no to that kind of thing? But there's a dark underbelly, and there's also something where you have little control. When you watch a lot of big artists, young artists like New Kids on the Block or NSYNC or the Backstreet Boys, look them in the eye when you see them on screen, because look behind the eyes, because you'll often see it's hollow sometimes, because a lot of them are pushed in directions they don't want to go in, record songs they don't want to record, wear clothes they don't want to record, and you see them pop up on these TV shows, and the kids sit at home and think, wow, amazing. But there's a whole little thing going on underneath, and it's if you can survive that downside. As I say, I had a breakdown, I left the business, went to the States, came back, and I'm very fortunate. I've got a second wind. I've got another chance. I'm a Renaissance man, and I'm back in the charts, and I'm writing my own material. So, you know, I've just recorded a ballad that I wrote, and I recorded it with a guy called Al Steele, and in the 80s there was a huge band called the Corgis. They had a big hit called Everyone's Gonna Learn Sometime, and they were big in the States as well, and I've just co-produced it with him. That will be my next single. I mean, I'm fortunate. Who gets a second chance? Who gets a second bite of the cherry? Not many people, and I'm lucky to got it. So if anybody's interested, the current song is very modern. My recent material has been kind of different, but I decided to strike out. And this time I thought, you know what? I'm going to have a go at TikTok, because, you know, I'm in the heritage thing and it's all 70s, 80s and 90s. But I want to get new people in. I was recently recording a TV show here, and I went out in the break and there was some fans outside, and they came over. And of course, they've got kids, they've got grandkids, you know. So they brought them over and said hi. And this girl, she was about 16, and she said, oh, I love your music. And I went, what, Yell's music? She went, yeah. She said, my mum and dad played it when I was growing up. And I got my phone out and I played her my new single, Promises. And she went, wow, I love that. She said, that could be in the Billboard chart now. It could be like, you know, Sabrina Carpenter or whoever. And I want to win up. I want to have an audience that isn't just 80 years old or 70 years old. As much as I love that, I want to have people, I want to be contemporary as well, you know? So the current single is quite contemporary, but it's got a hook. It's called Promises, Running and Running. And the great thing is loads of running clubs have picked up on it, and they're downloading it, using when they're going out running or going out doing sport. So download it. You can download it Spotify, iTunes, whatever. And as I say, it's currently number 17 on the Heritage chart, and I would love it. I mean, I'm competing with Tina Turner at the moment. She's nudging me behind in the charts. So I love Tina. Believe me, she's got a record out, even though she's passed away. A record company have got the track out, because that's how they make the money. A lot of big artists like Michael Jackson are making more money now when they've passed away than when they were alive.
Isn't that wild? Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Mike Reed. I had him on about a month ago, and his connection was so bad. I spent an hour trying to get in. I had him off, like it must have been the internet or his Wi-Fi or whatever, but it was kind of jacked up there. But yeah, I like what they're doing there. And it's funny you mentioned inspiration during COVID too, because like I was telling you earlier in the pre-show when we was talking, you know, the show started out with just 4 guys around a table, but without them lockdowns, probably would have never reached out to celebrities. I wouldn't be talking to you today. I wouldn't be talking to all them people I talked to. You know what I mean? The show probably would have never, you know, it might have been still a local following, but like when you branch out and you talk to different people and you expand yourself, you know, I learn a lot from guests I get on the show. A lot of people watching may not realize, look back at the guest show. You see medical doctors and musicians and all. I get them people who, you know, help me learn and help you learn, and hopefully, you know, get it going and everybody can do it together instead of this, like you said, give all the record companies money. Like, who are these record companies? I mean, why do they exist? Why do we even need them? And we got YouTube. We could figure that out ourselves, YouTube, Spotify, etc. Eventually, that's why I think there's going to be a return to the physical media eventually. I mean, if I could give you $7 for a CD, say that's $7 in your pocket as opposed to the, 3 cents I'd give you watching on, you know what I mean? It's that kind of stuff. I think.
Do you know what I make more money from now? Merchandise. And so many bands, when they're at gigs, they sell merchandise, because by the time they've played for the sound man, the lighting man, the travel, the gas, the food, they've earned nothing from the seat sales, but they earn from merchandise. So please, everybody, get onto my www.thedanieljames.com. Get yourself a cap, get yourself a t-shirt, get yourself a tote bag. We send them all over the world. People are loving them, and that pays my bills, and that helps me because I pay for my own recording. The video for the new single is out today. It's just been released today, and you can get it on YouTube. Go to my website, www.thedanieljames.com. You can see the new video. You can see all the stuff I've recorded in the last few years, and also you can get the merchandise, the link to the merchandise. And we earn more money from merchandise than we do from selling records. If I start I'm selling CDs at gigs, because as you say, $7 for a CD beats $1 from Spotify.
100%. There's the link for the
Can you imagine any other industry in the world, any other industry that is allowed to treat people as badly as those download sites are doing? It would be outlawed. I don't know how they've got away with it. I really don't know how they've got away with it. Perhaps the next thing Donald Trump needs to do is investigate the download sites after he's sorted out all the money that he's getting from the other thing that he's doing at the moment. Is it USAID or something? He's finding all this money they've been splurging.
Yeah. Due to current political situations in my source of employment, I will tiptoe around the issue, but I agree with you on that. I mean, if you look back at the records, though, think back to the 50s and payola, think back to the 60s, and now Elvis and all those guys are just getting shafted. And I don't think there's really ever been a time in modern Western culture history where we've had a fair time for musicians. They've never been paid. If they can figure out we get the revolution of killing Spotify and getting back, maybe we can finally come to a time where musicians can properly be paid for their stuff and we can all work it out. Cause you talk to guys, unless you're like the top, most of these guys just struggle out there, Daniel. They do. The
guy from Spotify was in front of a select committee in the Senate recently, in Congress, and they said to him, "You said when you launched that the top 30% would make a living from Spotify or whatever." It was, allegedly Spotify, and she said, "Look at this," and she showed him a list, and it was 1%. 1% of people were making a living and 99% were not. So I just wonder in what other industry that would be allowed. It's the most bizarre thing in the world. But it sounds like I'm moaning about it. Listen, I'm having a great time. I'm in a chart with Tina Turner, who's a legend, P.P. Arnold, Duran Duran, Culture Club. Why would I moan? I've got a second wind. I'm sitting here talking to you on the TV. Brilliant. So, as long as I can write material and as long as I can afford to make videos and sell the merchandise, then, I'll go to my grave very happy.
100%, man. So when back in the day, before you got into music and acting, like what did you do post, getting out of high school there? Did you?
I worked, in between college, I worked on an ice cream truck selling ice cream.
Okay.
I worked in Woolworths. Do you remember Woolworths?
Oh yeah. Woolworths 5 and 9.
Yeah, I worked in Woolworths in the warehouse, lugging the furniture, and then they promoted me to the furniture department, and I was selling sofas and stuff. And then a young manager came in and he said, you're the youngest person in the store. You should be working on the record store, the record department, which was like candy to me, because then I got to play all the latest records and get paid for it. So that was brilliant. And then I worked on a bowling green. I don't know whether you have them in the States, but it's a big piece of grass in a park, and people bowl, and they have to get the closest thing to a little ball. And teams, you know.
I played as a bocce ball, and I played that before. We don't have those too much though. That's more of a. It sounds weird. That's more of a rich person sport kind of thing, and it sounds weird because it's really easy. All you're doing is throwing the ball to the thing. But like, only people's houses I play it with, they were like at a big estate kind of thing, and I don't like. We're more of a horseshoes culture. You're familiar with horseshoes? You ever seen that? We got a lot of that.
Yes. And, well, in the UK, it was a very working class thing. It was guys after work would relax, and they would go and play balls for like an hour before they went home for their dinner. You know, it was like a way to relax from coming out of the factory or go out the truck. So it was a very working class game years ago. So I did lots of, I worked in lots of different working class kind of environments to pay my way through college and stuff.
Oh yeah. I already got a question from Jewel. She says, "What is Daniel's biggest inspiration behind his music composition?"
Anger. I want to set the record straight. I was kicked in the balls, and at the end of the current song, well, I repeat it several times. In the song, I say, "I'm still standing tall," and it's the very last line of the song. And what I'm really saying is, I survived. That's what I'm saying. And when you've been, this can happen in any walk of life. You can work in a factory, any kind of job. You can be beaten down and whatever. It's if you can pick yourself up and survive. And it took me a long time to do it. It doesn't just happen in the music business. But I'm fortunate now that I think what motivates me is creating great songs that people can sing along to. And also just proving to people I survived.
Oh, yeah. All right, let's still go back to this Eurovision stuff. Now, 1986 Eurovision, it says, I'm kind of familiar with this Eurovision because I got all these friends from the UK and all that. But like, describe Eurovision, especially for our American viewers, even back then. Like, how'd you hear about this? What was the contest? What is the contest? What was...
So basically, it's been going since like the 1950s. And after the Second World War, they decided to bring together all the broadcasting nations of Europe together. You know, they wanted to keep peace. They wanted it all to be lovely. And all the broadcasting nations came together once a year on a Saturday night. And about 3 months leading up to it, each country would pick a singer, and they'd get like 10 songs, and each country would vote for their favorite of those 10 songs. And that singer would go to one country. They'd all go to one country every year. And it would be like a 2-3 hour show where each country would sing their song. And then all the countries would tune in and they'd all vote and pick the one song for Europe, the one song for Eurovision. And that song would then be released around Europe. And quite often in the 50s and 60s, lots of big stars did it because it was a showcase. And then kind of 70s and 80s, it became regular people. Regular people did it, and I entered it. I didn't win it, but I had a great time, and you get to go all over the place. So it's kind of like a European institution, but Israel are involved in it now, and also right across the Russia, Australia's even in it. So if Australia's in it, Russia's in it, and Israel, I think it's about time we had an American act. So I think America need to get involved.
We could. I mean, we got so many it sounds like almost that's a precursor to like, American Idol, Britain's Got Talent, all those shows. Yeah. Sounds like that, but a more regional thing. I mean, if we do something like that in the States, you probably have to do like a 50-state competition to whittle that down would be, man, it would get cutthroat. They're so cutthroat over here, man. This country is so dog-eat-dog. America's a great place if you're doing good, man. It really is. Maybe the best place in the world. You're down in your luck, though, boy. You better have a good support system.
No, it is. I mean, I've worked in LA. I mean, if you go to an audition in LA or New York, they'll trip you up when you walk into the bathroom. Lock the bathroom door so they can do the dialogue. I mean, I know exactly, but you know, it's about survival, and every line of life has that. But you know, if every state put a song up and then they voted on the songs, and then the whole country got behind it, it would be amazing. You know, because you'd be competing against Europe and Australia. It'd be fantastic. But maybe it'll happen one day. You never know.
Never know. How soon after the Eurovision stuff did you join the band Yell and describe
2 years
signing a
later.
2 years
Two
later?
years later, I was presenting a kids' TV show on the BBC, and
Okay.
there was a guy who used to come in, a record plugger, and it was basically a guy that would bring records in and see if the TV show would show them. And I met this guy. He's called Jeff Chegwin, and when the series was finished, I was going up the subway and he was coming down the subway and he shouted across, "How's the show going?" And I said, "Actually, it's the last one today." He said, "What are you going to do next?" And I said, "I'm going to go back to writing songs." And he went, "What, you write songs?" And I went, "Yeah." He said, "Come and see me in my office." And he had an office in a building called Nomis, right in the west of London. And it was where the Who, all the big bands, the Rolling Stones, everybody rehearsed there. So it was a thrill just to go there. And I went to meet him, played him some music, and he said, "You know what? The one thing we don't have at the moment is a duo. Let's find another guy, team you up." And I teamed up with another guy, and we spent like 18 months writing an album. And then we went and toured. You know, we had a beat up old car. We drive right across the UK and like do a gig at 10 o'clock at night in a bar, do a gig at 12 o'clock, do a gig at 2 o'clock in the morning. You'd be dodging the drunks and dodging the bottles and the glasses. And then he said, "Right, you've done that. I want to take you to schools." And at lunchtime, we would go into schools after the kids had had the lunch, and we do our gig there. And so we got like the kids, we got the grown-ups, and we had a really big fan base. And then we did a showcase for record companies, and 2 record companies were interested. At the time, one of them was called CBS, now Sony, and then Fanfare Records, which was co-run by Simon Cowell. And I didn't want to sign to him because he was obsessed with cover versions, and he was obsessed with Stock Aitken and Waterman, and I didn't see that as my journey. But I ended up getting pushed into that way. Remember, pushed into things you don't want to do, and you end up doing them. But he was a great businessman. He put loads of money into the group, and before we knew it, we were flying around the world, doing magazine covers, going to openings of movies, going to the Grammys, and having hit records. And it was wonderful. The problem with it was he didn't have the vision for us to have any longevity, so it was over quicker than we needed it to be. You know, and he was also obsessed with cover versions. And I would go in every day and say, "Have a listen to this song," and we'd end up having these arguments and fights because he just wanted us to do cover versions. So, you know, I think it would have been better if we'd signed to CBS because I'd have probably got more of my material out. But the album, our first album, is called Let's Go. And it's got the hits, Let's Go Round Again, Instant Replay, One Thing Leads to Another. But there's also 5 songs on there that I wrote, really good ballads, and a track called I Get the Feeling. So that's been re-released on Secret Records as well. So, you know, people can look Yell up, or they can look me up and enjoy the new stuff. I'm happy.
Yeah. Well, I went back and watched a couple of videos, and forgive me if this is bad. It reminded me a lot of the New Kids on the Block back in the day. Like it was right around that same time frame.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys got compared to them a lot. Did you? How did you back then? I mean, did you do? Well, you were talking about you did a lot of covers. I mean, a lot of bands have always done that. The Jackson 5, you know, boy bands specifically, whatever. But like, how did you get inspiration for? Back then, did they let you give you some kind of creative control over some stuff? Did you get to?
Well, no. Simon used to go to sleep on a night. There's a book called the Guinness Book of Hit Singles, and it's all the hit singles. And he would sleep with it under his pillow. I mean, I'm sure he had other stuff under there, but definitely that one. And he would flick through that and like go, let's try that one, let's try that one, let's try that one, and it would be like, no, it was tacky. And oh, hang on a minute, someone's trying to cut me off here. Hello?
Yeah, you're still.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. So basically, to cut a long story short, we were in Ibiza, and the Dan Hartman track, Instant Replay, came on, and it filled the dance floor, but it was guys and girls. They both loved it. And I said to my partner, if we're going to do a cover, this guys like and ladies like, it's not just a tacky cover. So we came back to the UK, recorded it, and we had a top 10 hit all over the place.
Okay, nice. So you guys
listen, Joe, I'm going to have to sign off because we've got another interview and they keep bugging me.
Okay, totally. Well, definitely check out Daniel's new single, Promises. We dropped the link earlier, and have a great time, brother. We'll see you around.
Thank you for having me, and I look forward to maybe meeting you in the States at some point.
Yes, sir. If you get back to Cleveland, hit me up, man. I got your email. We'll holler at you.
Thank you, Joe. Really appreciate it.
All right, we'll see you guys.
Cheers, mate.
Everybody else in the chat, we'll see you. I don't have anything scheduled for Friday, so we'll you can go, Daniel. Good. So we'll just see you next time. Yeah, Friday's Valentine's Day, so if you guys have any ideas for a Valentine's Day show, hit me up. Let me know. We'll do something fun. I'm off the whole day. Probably from like 8 on. I have nothing going on 8 in the morning. I don't know because the kids at school, but so regardless, we'll see you on Valentine's Day Friday. It's gonna be a good one. Talk to you guys later.